Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon to those of you joining us from the East Coast of the United States and Canada. Good morning to those of us here on the West Coast. Good, very early morning to those few folks who always follow us in Hawaii. And of course, a good afternoon to those of you who are joining us in certain other parts of the Portuguese-speaking world, especially, of course, in Portugal, Madeira, and the Azores. Welcome to the 47th Annual Conference, Education and Culture of the Luso-American Education Foundation, a conference that began, as most of you know, with those of us in Central California and throughout the state of California, and even the entire West Coast. The conference began actually 47 years ago in the beautiful city of San Diego. What a place to hold a conference. And it began as part of the bilingual education. So 47 years ago, almost half of a century ago, there were still immigrants coming or had just come recently from mainland Portugal and the Azores and Madeira, and obviously needed to adapt to the new languages. They went to school, especially the children. And so bilingual education was something that was popular back then. A Portuguese movement of educators got together with state officials, and the conference began as a conference to train, especially not only teachers, but also teaching aides, teaching assistants who were Portuguese, who needed the training to be part of the bilingual system. Of course, that happened for the first few years, and then the conference took on a term because bilingual education became kind of a taboo in California for a while. Now it's back again, but it became kind of a taboo for a while, and its conference changed, and now it's a conference on education and culture. And ever since we've been doing it, this is our fourth year PBBI. Online because of the pandemic, but even before, as our guests know, and those of you following us, we've tried to, when it has been in the Valley anyway, and other parts of the state as well, but we try to be more of a reflection of the Portuguese American experience in California, which the good Lord knows that we need lots of reflecting. So we're talking about that, someone who I've reflected a lot on the Portuguese American community with, that to the point that sometimes she tunes me off. I'm just
No,
kidding.
never.
And that is Angela Simões. She is, of course, as all of you know, former chair of PALCUS, the Portuguese American Leadership Council of the United States. We serve on the board together, thanks to her invitation. And she is all about everything that's Portuguese. She's still, of course, very involved, immediate past chair of PALCUS, very involved with many other facets of the Portuguese American community in the Northern California, very involved in the beginning stages and still, but very involved in the beginning stages with the Dia de Portugal efforts that now is an event that is part of our social calendar in California. We're going to talk about a lot of different things with Angela. We have a full hour with her, but we're going to start with the Riso book. So first and foremost, welcome. Thanks for taking time.
Thanks, Denise. It's always a lot of fun having conversations with you about our community.
Well, we have often on our podcast together, Politicus, by the way. If you never listen to Politicus, do that. Go wherever you listen to podcasts and listen to Politicus. We have some exciting upcoming episodes. We had a great one with a adjunct faculty from Columbia not too long ago. It was, I think, our last. And in the next few weeks, we have one with Michael Hazenders that I'm looking forward to. That was an awesome conversation. Let's talk about Riso books. So a few years ago, I don't know, tell us when, if you want to date yourself, but you began this journey and you have them all there of basically telling the story of the Portuguese, a little bit of the Portuguese language to teach to young children, but also some traditions that are Portuguese to children who sometimes don't hear these stories, especially because grandmas are not the grandmas of 30 or 40 years ago. They don't have the time. They're also, busy with their careers nowadays. And so children's literature is very, very important in all ethnicities. And we were lacking until you came out with your books, and a couple of other authors as well now, about the Portuguese American experience with kids. So tell us how it began and a little bit of that process, and we'll talk about the books.
Sure. So never ever in a million years thought that I would be writing children's books in my career. I've been doing public relations for tech companies for the last almost 30 years. And when we had our daughter in 2013, we really wanted to make sure that she also spoke Portuguese. And me being third generation, I was not fluent. I did not grow up speaking Portuguese. I knew a few words here and there. My husband was fluent. He's first generation and only spoke Portuguese in the home. So, great benefit there. But it was still difficult to kind of constantly speak Portuguese in our home. And so children's books were going to be the way. So we would bring children's books in Portuguese from Portugal, but I couldn't even read those. Like, there were words in those books that I just didn't understand. And it just occurred to me that, if it was in both English and Portuguese, I could figure out what the Portuguese word meant because the translation is there. And then I would be learning right along with her. And so I started looking for some bilingual children's books. And what I was finding really just didn't fit what I was looking for. There wasn't a lot to begin with. And most of what I was finding was on Amazon. And then sometimes they were too long, or it was kind of a strange story. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just write one. And what am I going to write about? Well, we have a daughter, so I'm going to write about our daughter. And so I wrote Linda Menina, Pretty Girl. And it was really about how we wake up in the morning and Bom dia, minha linda, and, estás tão linda, those kinds of things, right? And had the idea and published through the Portuguese Heritage Publications of California. So they were a great help in my learning process of how you publish a book. Learned a lot through that, and then started getting queries. Well, what about boy moms? We need a book like that too. So we did a Linda Menina version. And then it just kind of took off from there because people, I think, had the same reaction that I did, that they were needing this kind of resource for their kids, but there just weren't any. And I thought, okay, well, if I write something else, what am I going to write about? Well, there isn't a book about the festas and going to the festas. And that was a huge part of my life. So even though I didn't grow up speaking Portuguese, I grew up very ingrained in the Portuguese community. So I've been, queen twice, side maid 4 times, marched in every parade from here, from Sacramento down to even San Diego, for almost every summer of my life until I was 18. Danced in Luso. I served as officers of Luso, including president. As you mentioned, got involved with the Dia de Portugal. So, just being Portuguese was like part of who I was. And so, of course, you write about what you know. And then, so that book came out, and again, really great response. And so then the ideas just start flowing, as you know, right? You're like, oh, we could write about this, and we could write about that, and we could write about this. And the next book was, actually, I take that back. The next book was the Números, Cores e Fruta, which is purely educational because, one of the things we looked for was flashcards for our daughter in both Portuguese and English. And there was one set on Amazon that came from the UK, and that was it, right? And so the Números, Cores e Fruta was a way to just be educational. And so then we came out with the Festa book. And then I realized that, the Galo Barcelos is a legend that we all have heard of. We've heard different versions. There are websites that have different versions of the story. I think we all have a Galo in our home somewhere, but there was no book. Like, there was no, like, if I wanted to buy a story about the Galo and give it to somebody, there wasn't one. And that just blew my mind. And so, I didn't write the story. It's based on the legend. I have to thank my mom for the initial sketches, because believe it or not, she actually drew out these sketches for her class. She was a teacher for 45 years, an elementary school teacher. So used her sketches as the inspiration. And then Elia Borges Souza, who has been the illustrator for all my books, adapted those and did a wonderful job as always. So yeah, so that's how it started. And so, got a long list of ideas. We have Uma Casa Portuguesa coming out by the end of the year. That's based on the lyrics of the song by Amalia. We did get permission to use the lyrics from the Sociedade de Autores Portugueses. And yeah, so there's lots of ideas. And so we'll be publishing more as long as, I guess, I'm interested in doing it. And then I should also mention, I do get questions from people about, well, what's your process and can you help me? And so for a moment, I thought that I might, be a publishing house or turn something into a publishing house for other Portuguese authors. And I worked with Idalina, oh my gosh, what Souza, I can't remember. I can't believe I'm blanking on her last name, but she wrote a book. It was a collection of short stories of her time growing up on the island of Flores. So Island Girl, Menina da Ilha, helped her publish that as well. And it was a wonderful experience. And so that's also available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Walmart and lots of other websites. But that also just made me, this is a side gig for me. And I have a full-time job and lots of other things going on. I just don't have the time to dedicate to, being a publisher for other authors. So I am happy to give advice and tell you what the process is and all those kinds of things. But yeah, Riso will not be publishing other authors under our Riso name. However, Idalina is doing a wonderful job of promoting her book. She's been all over California. She even did a presentation in Flores when she was there on vacation. And I think we're going to try and do one through PBBI at some point down in the Tulare, Fresno area. As I understand it, there's a lot of people from Flores in that area. So yeah, so it's a beautiful book. The stories are lovely, and so yeah, that's kind of where we are.
And so your next plan is Uma Casa Portuguesa, and basically turning the lyrics into a children's story.
So we didn't really turn it into a story. We took the lyrics and then provided the translation. And so that way, it's one thing to just sing the song. I mean, there's actually some songs where the words, but do you really know what the words mean, right? And so we illustrated, so the lyrics, and then we have an illustration of, Azulejo, the San Jose, the Quatro Paredes Caiadas, those kinds of things. Pão e vinho sobremesa, it's illustrated, right? And so that way, if a parent wants to play the song in the background and kind of go through the book and sing the lyrics, right? And then at the end of the book, we also explain where the song originated, how it came to be, and that Amalia was the first one. Well, actually, she wasn't the first one to sing it, but she was the second, and then made it popular. Yeah, so that's kind of the book. Maybe we will write a story itself about Uma Casa Portuguesa, but again, there was no place. I felt like it was such a iconic song for our community, but not everybody really truly understood the meaning or even knew how it originated. So again, just one of those things where trying to capture these elements of our heritage that aren't being explained as the generations go on.
And do you find that most of it's tough to know who buys the books, obviously, one-on-one, but would it be safe to say that most of the folks who acquire the books through these different platforms that you have have a Portuguese connection? I mean, they're maybe second, third, or even fourth generation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I can speak firsthand too when I go to the Dia de Portugal festival and have a table, or go to other events and have a table. The people that are, of course, it's a Portuguese event, so the people that are there have a connection to the Portuguese community or have Portuguese heritage, but it's always either a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, somebody buying for children. And it's actually cute to watch them flip through the book, especially the Festa book or the Galo book, because it's like they're walking down memory lane a little bit. Oh, I remember we used to do that. And oh, I remember this story that Vavá used to tell us. And so again, it's like, yeah, you used to hear these stories and now you can pass the stories on. So very much.
Indeed. And so I know that you're busy with all the other stuff, but of course you have Uma Casa Portuguesa. Anything else that you're kind of saying, well, maybe this and that would be in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on a website that will start to classify the books into 4 collections. So one will be Heart, Coração, and that is all about family and the love we have for our family. So we'll be writing some stories about vovôs and vovós and tias e primos, you know, all the people that you have a love for in your life. Herança, Heritage, will continue with books like the Galo Barcelos. So we'll be working on one about the Rainha Santa Isabel, because all these queens that are marching down our streets during Festa season, I wonder how many of them know who she was and really about her life and what she represented. So that will be the next one in that collection. And then there's Diaspora. So it's all about our experiences as a diaspora, right? Even though I'm not an immigrant, I still am part of the diaspora and I participate in our activities. So things like the festas, folklore dancing, soccer, the bands, you know, all those elements of the activities of the diaspora. And then finally, educação, so education. So other books like Números, Cores e Fruta. So purely learning vocabulary, how to count, how to read, those kinds of things. So more in that category.
Maybe we can also work together on a plan to do a children's book about the 25 de Abril,
That would be amazing. Absolutely.
how it transferred, you know, Portugal into a democracy. That would be taking the stories that our prior guest, Commander Jorge Betancourt, has done. He has a wonderful story of kind of a children's story that we could adapt. Maybe.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
I think that would be good for people to understand that Portugal wasn't always like this.
Right.
Sometimes we take it for granted. That's actually been some things that we've been talking about with different guests, is like we take it for granted that you know, there's been democracy and the modern kind of Portugal that, you know, we tout, although Portugal has lots of problems, as we all know, but it's totally different than what it was, you know, 50 plus years ago, and that would be wonderful to teach the children, basically.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Many of their grandparents or great grandparents came because of the dictatorship, or because those who came before the dictatorship during the monarchy, we had the same issues. You know, it's been a different situation, so that would be kind of interesting as well. I would imagine, being through these platforms, you get readers all over. Is there interest also from the East Coast? Because your Festa book, I know, can be read anywhere, but it's very Californian, because we were just talking about that with Rui Faria from the Associação dos Imigrantes dos Açores, Açorianos, which is, you know, I mean, the festas in California are totally different than the East Coast festas. Even the festas, they're very, very different hours here. So do you find interest even in a book like O João e a Maria Vão à Festa, that you find interest from other states that don't have these kind of traditions?
We do. I think the outside of California interest comes mostly for the Lindo Menino and Linda Menina book, also the Galo book, because the Galo is, you know, no matter where you are in the diaspora, no matter what country you've heard of the Galo Barcelos. And then also the Números, Cores e Fruta. So the nice thing about self-publishing on Amazon or through another platform that, like Ingram Spark, that puts it on Barnes and Noble and Walmart and lots of other global sites, is that now people in Australia and the UK and Latin America, they can all purchase the books as well. And so we have had people in all of those regions purchase some of the books as well. But yeah, I think the Festa book has been mostly successful here in California.
Yeah, I would think California, the West Coast, Idaho now has their festas are pretty much like ours, because they're kind of an offspring of ours. Colorado, I think, and you know, a couple of Texas is going into that, and most of these states have a kind of an offspring of California. So something that started very part-time and still continues to be very part-time for you, but you find satisfaction with it mostly. Do you think it would be important to also, and we've talked about this, actually, we've never put it together because we had a conversation, I think, at the last Luso conference about publishing, and we had authors on, children's authors such as yourself, and we had others as well, if you recall, and everybody even yesterday or correct Thursday when I had the literary experience with four poets, all good friends of yours and mine, Sam Pereira, Anthony Barcelos, Millicent Borgia-Cardi, and Diana Ramos Firestone. And of course, they all, Millicent is kind of the dean of promoting. She can promote and she knows how to promote and everything else. But it would be interesting to have a bigger presence, and now children's authors and also for adults in different genres, from poetry to fiction, and to maybe find a way to be present at some of the, especially the smaller book fairs. Like I think Tracy does an excellent book fair, if I'm not mistaken. Tracy or Manteca, one of those two cities. So maybe get together with these authors and promote our presence at some of these American book fairs, because I think sometimes there are readers out there that be a quarter Portuguese or an eighth or even less than that, and they just don't go to the Dia de Portugal festival, or they don't go to our events, our festas, but they do go to American book fairs. So is it something that you think is even feasible that we work toward that?
I think it is. It certainly will take a concerted, organized effort. And I think you and I have talked about trying to wrangle a group together that not only that helps to promote Portuguese and Portuguese American authors, but also helps educate on the process to publish, right? So there's a lot of people out there that maybe have an idea for a book, but not really sure where to begin. And not that we would publish for them, but like, well, here, you go here to do the manuscript, and you go here to do the layout, and here's where you publish, and all these kinds of things. I think another way to do it is have one central location on the internet where we can be highlighted. So for example, PALCUS, in partnership with the Embassy of Portugal and also with FLAD, has a website called Portuguese American Art Gallery, where we highlight the works of Portuguese American artists. We could do something very similar for authors, and there could be categorized by poetry, fiction, nonfiction, children's literature, all those kinds of things, historical. So that's definitely something that's very doable, and it just, again, takes a concerted effort to coordinate between PALCUS, perhaps PBBI, and anyone else that wants to help do that. And then the question always comes down to who's going to do the work and actually post the information to the website. And luckily we have a paid staffer at PALCUS, and we can probably throw it over to her, and she would do it. But again, it's a concerted effort, and then some research into where are the book fairs and making those. Hey, like, I didn't know there was a Tracy book fair. I mean, it makes sense. I think probably every city has some sort of book fair. How do you find out where they are? How do you submit to participate? Those kinds of things. And so I think there's also some initiative that needs to be done on the behalf of the authors, right? Wherever they are, look up a book fair where you're located and submit your works.
But that's an excellent project for FLAD. FLAD needs more projects to pay for,
right?
So that would be because that would have a direct result on Portuguese American publishing. I mean, if FLAD could fund a project like that, which just off the top of my head, I know it would probably cost a minimum, to do all that work and develop the website and everything else. We're talking about $25,000. And that's something that's very feasible for FLAD to do. Not many organizations, including Portuguese American organizations, are going to foot a bill like that. But that would be a service indeed for Portuguese American publishers, Portuguese American authors, to have their books out there independently, who publishes it. If it's self-published, if it's published through a university press, if it's published through press, whatever. Yeah, that's a very, very good idea. Maybe we can work on that together.
We gave ourselves more work, Denise, like,
Another
because
project for that. So indeed, it's there's sometimes a lack. I know that our next guest, which you know is Zachary Hamush, also did a children's book on going to the bullfights. So there's a need, and there's actually been a lack of children's book on Portuguese American experiences, and I would even say
absolutely
same thing for our friends in Canada on the Portuguese Canadian experience. I mean, there's a multitude of things that that would be important to do, and hopefully you'll continue, and hopefully others will get involved as well.
Yeah, that would, I mean, like I said, as long as I am able, I'll probably continue publishing, and I am happy to share my experience with anybody that has questions, even share the resources and the people that have helped me. Angela Lanes, Silvera Lanes has been, I mean, I don't know that I would be able to, she does all the layouts of the books. And so, and she's wonderful to work with. Elia Souza has been amazing as an illustrator, and it's kind of been us as a team. I know you've done some translations for us. And so it's nice to have those resources in the community as well. And so I'm happy to share all of those. I'm not here to compete or, keep it all for myself. I think we need more, right? And so let's enable more people to do more.
And I'm just showing everyone, as they can see, this is Amazon. I'm not promoting Amazon. Get it from wherever you are, but I have an Amazon account. It's kind of easier to get on there. Right. So here are all the books, and as you can say, you can see, you can get it real quick. As a matter of fact, I see that people have Kindle Unlimited. They can even have Linda Menina for free. So there you go.
There you go.
If you are a Kindle Unlimited account, a lot of people are, because they read a lot of different books. So there you are. One of the other projects that I'd like to talk to you, which we've talked before, which is, let me get out of here now, which is, of course, audiobooks. I know that we have kind of an ongoing conversation that led by you in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 months, about the possibility not everybody has the time to sit down and read for an hour a day, and sometimes people are busy, but sometimes people a lot of us here in California and the East Coast as well spend a lot of time in the car. And that's why people listen. That's why podcasts have become so popular. Or when you go for a walk or a run, or you go to the gym. So there is that possibility. Audiobooks are very, 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 very popular in the United States. Sometimes we look at these things with the eyes or the lenses of Portugal, but they're not popular at all that I know of, and I've done a little bit of research. I mean, there are some, but they're not very popular. But here in the United States, they're very, very popular. I know that it would be probably an initial investment, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that not necessarily maybe children's books, I don't know about that, but maybe even those. But I think children like to look at the images and see that, but on, a book about, the history of the community, or the history of the Azores, or the history of whatever, sometimes books that are, 200 to 300 pages that people, on a 4-hour trip love to read. Love to listen.
I'm 100% with you, because I'm one of those people that, when I was commuting on the bus, 15 years ago, yes, I had time to read, but now if I'm going anywhere, I'm in the car. So I just don't have time to physically sit down and read anymore. So, and I think I've told you before, even articles in newspapers, I would love if they would just have, an audio version that I could listen to, even if it was a 5-minute, reading. But, our daughter's 10. And when she jumps in the car with me and I pick her up from school, the first thing she does is puts on Audible and wants to listen to the book that we're listening to together. And so I think kids even love that, if it's a story that they would love, right? Or that they're interested in. And so to the extent that there could be books aimed at young people that are entertaining, give a little bit of history, throw some Portuguese words in there that are funny. I mean, I absolutely think that young people would listen to them on audio as well. But as I think I sent you a screenshot of a picture of some books that I have here that are still in the wrapper that I really would love to read. They're by Portuguese American authors, and I just haven't gotten around to it. But if there was an audio version, it'd be absolutely in my queue and I'd be listening to them. So I think audiobooks is certainly an area to explore. We've done a little bit of research on what it takes to do that. It doesn't seem that hard at all. I think maybe it's ensuring the recording quality is there, and then finding somebody who can edit, do the post-production, and then you upload to Audible. You don't need some special permissions or anything like that, right? It's just like with Amazon. You don't need a special permission or a credential or anything. You just open an account and you publish. It's quite simple. Yeah. So I would love to see more of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some books, especially even Portuguese books that have been translated to English, that are good stories that maybe we could, it does take some investment. I don't see some of our typical, some of our Portuguese organizations, and it's not a knock, it's just they're not going that route. Okay.
Right.
The fetchers have other things to worry about. They have halls to maintain and physical structures and things like that. But I think, some of the foundations, such as this one here, Luz American Education Foundation, PFSA, some of those organizations that also have physical buildings to keep, but have other funding sources to come through. I think it would be wise to do maybe pick 3 books and maybe do those 3 as a project for like a 2-year project, because it cannot be done overnight. But maybe the thing would be in 2 years we try to translate 3. I mean, try to do an audio version of 3 and then put them forth, and lots of people that can do the voices. I know that our good friend that you've met, I think Anthony, I can't think of Anthony's last name, from actually your old neck of the woods. I think he lives now. His family was originally from Artesia, but he lives in the Stockton, Lodi, Sacramento area. Anthony Stivish, and yes, that we've done some webinars together. Anthony has a wonderful voice. He does a podcast, and he could partner up with a couple of different people.
But if you think about PFSA as well, right? What a great way to promote the library.
Correct. Yeah. So I would call out our organizations. I mean, calling out in the good sense of it.
We're giving you all more work to do.
But we're asking PFSA, Luso Education Foundation, Luso Financial, some of the historical societies. If you have an extra, couple $1,000 that you'd like to invest, we can pull this money together and maybe put a project that we could take 2 or 3 books, maybe a young person's book, as you said. And then maybe a couple of other books that are kind of even classics. I
think one thing that not only us as individuals, but these organizations should really be asking themselves is, in the work that we're doing, how are we helping to preserve our heritage and our stories for the long term, right? Not just at an event that happens once a year, because once those people that run the event are no longer here, that's going to go away. And if there's no record of anything, in 20, 50 years, we could be just gone, right? I mean, we'll still, our kids and grandkids and great grandkids will also be here, but they'll just have completely assimilated into mainstream society. And so, again, I don't make a lot. I think I made, $400 over the last 2 years with Riso books, which is nothing, right? And basically that pays for the next publishing. The point is to try and preserve some of these stories that just aren't being told and handed down. And, it's, who knows, maybe Amazon isn't going to exist in 50 years, which I highly doubt. But again, it's my little contribution to our community to try and preserve some of these stories. And I think organizations that have significantly more resources should be looking at that, right? Because there's so much more that could be done.
And we should be looking at, I don't know if there's a lot of organizations in California, when I mean a lot, a couple dozen, that have libraries, Portuguese libraries, Portuguese Athletic Club in San Jose, some of the cultural organizations, the Casa dos Açores in Hilmar. And why not invest in buying a Portuguese author's book like your books, like other books, and have them there, because indeed we don't know how they're going to be 50 years from now. But in the library, if they're taken care of, they'll be there. We should also push to have these books, your books, children's books, and adult books that are by Portuguese authors at the local library. Millicent has done a wonderful job, with her books, trying to connect. But I think we need to kind of pull this together, because again, even if
Mhm.
it's just 100 libraries buy the
Right,
book, that's 100
right,
books, that you
right,
sell right away.
right.
And it's a way to preserve this stuff. I tell people all the time with YouTube, we have no idea. We use YouTube, as you know, and PALCUS does too, and all of us do, to archive. We use it as an archive of what we have, but everything that we have is also archived at the Fresno State Library, such as this conversation here, because we don't know if YouTube is going to be around and in what format it's going to be around 60 or 70 years from now. It might be totally different. So we also have to worry about having a second place to preserve this stuff,
Absolutely.
and be the same thing, with the audio books. Put them in audio, and then have an archive of these things as well, because it would be really, really important to reach as many people as we can. Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned schools, and, that's one thing that I have put out there to the community a few times on my Facebook page, was if you have if there's a Portuguese school out there, or even a grammar, a public school or whatever, Catholic school, any kind of school where your children go, if you want me to donate a set of books to that school, I'm happy to do that. And so I've donated, I think, more books than I've actually sold. But so, if you have a school, or even if it's a community school, and you would like to have these books, message me on Facebook, and send me the address, and I just ask that you pay for shipping, and and that's it. But yeah, happy to do that, because like you said, it's getting the books into the hands of the people that we want to be reading them. But it sounds like Millicent has done a wonderful job. And so maybe when we kind of get this group together, that's going to help promote, and then also help get book fairs going, help get, books into libraries. I mean, it's certainly doable, and a lot of it's done digitally, right? So it's just a matter of getting together.
You just gave me a heck of an idea. So that we'll
This
explore.
happens every time we talk.
We'll explore
Every time.
together we'll try to do this in the springtime. I'll announce it here officially. So in the springtime, I'm going to try to get one of the we have a couple local community Portuguese heritage schools to do a reading of your books at Fresno State with you, done by the students. I think that would be awesome.
Okay.
That would be awesome. And
Done.
I think we have to be in the evening, obviously, because these community schools are in an evening. I think most of them are on Mondays. But instead of them meeting for their regular session at their community, maybe instead of they normally meet at 5, maybe they could meet at Fresno State like at 5:30, and we could do a community reading of a couple of the students, reading a few of the books. Maybe we'll concentrate on the Festa and the Galu book.
Okay.
First way.
That's awesome. I love that.
That is one of the resolutions, conclusions of the Lutheran American Education Foundation Conference, because we do need to bring all of these things together. So, Angela, as I don't want to run out of time with you, obviously. So I know that the main reason was to talk about children's literature. The main reason was to talk about children's your contributions, but I don't think we would do a disservice to the community if we did not allow you, as immediate past chair, to talk a little bit about the numbers of the recent numbers of the PALCUS. We've of the census that PALCUS has worked hard at. We've been waiting too long for this. It's 2023, and the census was completed almost 3 years ago, but folks have to understand we were in the middle of a pandemic, and not a lot of things were done in the beginning of 2021 because of the way it was done, because of the pandemic. Obviously, we were still in a pandemic in 2021, and so now we have those numbers, and I think you're going to share that info, with us. Okay, so tell us a little bit about these numbers.
Yes, so it's important to know kind of the history as well of whether or not we have actually been counted as a community. So back in 2000, we were counted as part of the decennial census. So decennial census happens every 10 years, and it's an actual count of an attempt to count every single person in the United States and the United States territories, as compared to the American Community Survey, which is a sampling, a random sampling of 13% of the population. And then based on that data, they have algorithms that make estimates about the rest of the population of the rest of the country. So it's not an actual count. It gives us a pretty good idea of things, but not an official count. So in 2020, we were counted only because some people knew to write in Portuguese if they marked other or something like that, and they remembered to write it in. But we didn't have an official code for our for the census.
In 2010.
No, this is in 2000.
In 2000. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's
no, I'm sorry.
1.1 million around
Yes.
almost 1.2. Okay.
Right. So then in 2010, this data actually comes from the American Community Survey because they didn't ask the ethnicity question at all in the 2010 census. So if you go onto the data.census.gov website and you go to 2010 decennial census and look up Portuguese, you will get a big fat zero. Right. There's just no data at all. So we have to pull American Community Survey data for 2010. 2020 was the first time that we not only had a code for Portuguese, but we had a code for Azorean and we had a code for Madeiran. And all three categories were combined to make the Portuguese count. And so, as you know, PALCUS had a 2-year campaign leading up to the census called Make Portuguese Count, where we really tried to encourage people to write in Portuguese as their heritage or their ancestry, regardless of which race they chose. They literally could choose Black and Chinese and then write in Portuguese as well, and it would count, right? Because we know that our community has been diversified with, marrying other cultures, but people, even if they're a fourth Portuguese, still, some have a strong identification of having Portuguese heritage. So you could check white and write in Portuguese. You could check white, Hispanic, Chinese, and Black if you want. You could check them all. It didn't matter. But if you wrote in Portuguese or you wrote in Azorean or you wrote in Madeiran, we were all counted as Portuguese. And so we worked with a group of what we called captains, Make Portuguese Count captains, about 80 individuals across the country in different states who would host local educational events about why it's important for us to be counted, how to fill out the census. And it was a very short form, right? I think it was like 5 questions, that was it. And this is the result of that effort. And I think the biggest show of how a grassroots effort can make a difference is Hawaii. Hawaii went from the 8th position of the state with the most Portuguese to the 3rd. And why would, it's not like a whole bunch more people moved to Hawaii. I think
very very few from other states that were already 2nd or even 3rd generation, no immigrants, obviously.
Right. And so I think that was just a matter of more people knowing, oh, I can identify as Portuguese. Yeah, I think even if it was my vavá or my bisavó or my great-grand, yes, I'm Portuguese. And so they would write it in. So I think, what a great testament to a grassroots campaign and the effectiveness that we can have. And, so why is it important to have these numbers? Well, because, when we want to go petition our local school board to say we want to have Portuguese at this school, they're going to say, well, how many Portuguese are in this district? How many Portuguese families really want this language as an option? And those are the kind of numbers that we can present. If we have no data, then we're like, well, we think there's people here that want it, but now we have actual numbers that can show this is the population in the area, and this is why we need it. There's also health data, right? More if we know that there's a particular disease that affects our community, and we're seeing concentrations in a particular area, is that because there are more Portuguese in that area or not? And so there's just so many other reasons why it's important for us to have this data. And we'll be doing a deep dive into the data with Dr. Dulce Scott on October 26th. She's crunching all of the data. She's downloading it all and analyzing it, and also bringing in American Community Survey data, as well as data from the PALCUS Index survey that we have done. We're going to be doing another one next year. I think we're 2 or 3 years behind on that. But she will be giving a complete picture of what this, what does this mean for our community, and what are some of the different observations that we can extract from this data.
Yeah, there's a couple of surprises, and you also were kind enough to send me, which I'm working on those numbers myself also, maybe for us to work with our other partner and our other board, the California Portuguese American Coalition, of the state numbers. And those are surprising to me, a lot of things, I mean, Alameda still continues to be one of the top counties for Portuguese presence, and people keep on saying, well, everybody's leaving the Bay Area. Well, not everybody must be leaving the Bay Area, because they still
We're still here,
yet it's one of the areas that, as you know, because it's a county that you're very familiar with, it's one of the areas that there's very few, hardly any Portuguese language schools. Where you look at Merced with only 13,000 people compared to I think it's 15,000 Portuguese, if I'm not mistaken, in Merced County. And don't, those of you out there, I'll have those numbers exactly because Angela sent them to me. But yet, they have right there in Hilmar the biggest Portuguese, concentration. And they are able to do an immersion program, so there's all these interesting things that one can look at, and we can say, how do we, more than, just saying we're number one or we're number two or we're number three, what can we do with this now? And that's where, it's important to also have those numbers that Dulce, our good friend Dulce, is working on to put forth in, and do this webinar for PALCUS in the next few weeks. Because one of the surprises, of course, was Hawaii. I mean, obviously that was, and that is, as you said, a testament to grassroots and a testament to something that we've always talked about, and I feel very strong about, which is there's this sense of pride in second and third generations that sometimes you don't have in the first generation. I'm just European, whatever. But why should I, take the time? I'm just white, or I'm whatever or I'm Latino, or whatever you want to put it under, But and so there's this sense of renewness, for lack of a better word, in sometimes second, third, and in Hawaii's case, mostly third and fourth generation, obviously. And the other surprise to me, Angela, was California, where everybody said, oh, everybody's leaving California. Every single Portuguese leaving California. And we went from, 335 to 350. We actually grew, so again, it's not immigration, because we didn't have, we may have had in 10 years 1,000 immigrants, or maybe a few more, but not that much more. But it is because of the work that PALCUS did, because we did have some people leave. We probably did have 1,000 leave, but we still continue to be number one with 350. And the other, they're all surprises to me, most of them. The other surprise is Massachusetts.
That went down. I know, right?
Yeah, I for sure thought that, as much, because, we did, when I mean we, and I didn't do anything, okay? When I mean we, because I was in PALCUS board, that's all, folks, but I didn't work on it. Marie Fraley did a lot of work. And
yes, so shout out to Marie Fraley, for sure.
For sure she did, and a lot of the captains, and there were a lot of captains in Massachusetts, and I thought it would bring out, and we did a lot of publicity in Massachusetts. The advertising was with the Portuguese channel in Massachusetts, with the Portuguese
radio, and
with the Portuguese press in Massachusetts, with the Portuguese with the Portuguese Times and others, and yet they went down. So that was a surprise to me. Florida was not a surprise. I thought that they would be on the rise, because there's a lot of people moving there. And Rhode Island was also surprised. I thought it would be more. I thought we would have shaken a lot more people than we did. And then, the other surprises, Massachusetts, New York and New Jersey, we always know that, there's probably more, but we're not reaching. There's been a lot of disconnect. I've seen that sometimes. I think the West Coast does a real good job with connecting, and thanks to your work as well, and our our fraternal societies, and connecting with third and fourth generation. I think we've done a good job. Sometimes the newer generations have not done as much, because there is an older community, as you know, in New York and Jersey too, and then Texas. I mean, big rise in Texas as well. And Washington State, my son and his whole family's there now, so that brought another 4. But Washington State, that is very interesting. And what do you attribute to Washington State? Maybe we had a couple of captains there, did we not? 3 or 4, I think at least
we did.
Yeah,
we did. I think it's a couple of things. We have seen more people moving into the area. I think there's been a little bit more promotion of things Portuguese up there. I know this has just happened recently, so it didn't really affect the census numbers, but there was the very first Permanência Consular up in the Pacific Northwest. So I think there's been a demand, that doesn't just happen overnight. There has to have been a demand for that kind of service, right? So I think
consulates only happen where there's pressure.
Right. Right. So I think it was that. And then again, also the education that to people that you can fill in. And then that was the other thing too, is that you could fill in multiple ethnicities. So you didn't have to choose one. So if you were Portuguese and Puerto Rican and Chinese and Albanian, right? You could write down all of those and still get counted. So I think the way that the census did it in 2020 was actually pretty good, because it allowed people to identify as all of the things that they identify with, not just have to pick one or pick one race, right? Because I think a lot of people are not only multiracial, but multi-ethnic. And so it allowed for people to do that. And I think that's a big reason you're seeing a jump in some of these areas.
Yeah, it's who we are. We're a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial country. So again, kudos to PALCUS for all the work, and thanks to you, and thanks to Marie, of course, who headed the Make Portuguese Count. And these numbers, there are, more than surprises. Now we need to do something with them, which is how do we proceed with some of these things, and how do we proceed, because 10 years will come around, actually it's now 7, to the next process, which is, in some of these states, I do believe that social media, and with all its ills, and easier access to information online, and some of the online, the PALCUS newsletters, some of the things we're doing with PBBI and a couple other organizations, I think it brings more awareness to Portuguese things. And so the more things we can do online to bring people together, whether they are in Idaho or Colorado or California or Hawaii, I think the more they get more information about their ancestry, and then they become, it still surprises me, it's a month later, that I have 26 students taking a class called Azores Culture, History, and Literature at Fresno State, and that 11 of them are not Portuguese at all. When I asked them, when they wrote their first piece, because it's a writing class, obviously a lit class, why are they taking Portuguese? The 11 that are not Portuguese told me because the majority of them, my neighbor's Portuguese, and I've always, and from the Azores, I've always want to know something about them. They're such nice people, and and so sometimes we are our best ambassadors without knowing that we are.
Right.
And I think that's online, like the courses that we've done through Fresno State that were online, and we're investigating something to do a history course online as well, non-academic. I think it brings people together, and it brings awareness, and then they know a little bit more about who their relatives are, or were, their great-grandparents, and I think then it entices them to put that on the census. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Angela. I appreciate these numbers. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you for the event. Thank you for
the opportunity. It's always fun to talk about my books. And actually, if you don't mind, I just want to share, since I didn't have Evelina's picture up there, I do want to make sure that people know that that we did publish this as well. And
Mendoza,
Mendoza, yeah. I said I got the Sousa part right.
I just came to me right now. Linda Sousa Mendoza, yes.
Yes, so her book is hardback. You can get it on Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Amazon, and I think like a couple hundred other sites if you just Google it, but those are the main ones. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Yes. And so again, thank you so much. We appreciate it very, very much, and take care, and we'll be in touch with all the other projects that we've just put
we'll put each other to work. Thank you, Denise. Always a pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks.
And to
Bye-bye.
all of you, thank you all. And to all of you joining us here on the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, hosting, I should say, the Luso-American Education Foundation Conference. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back very, very soon. So please, we'll be back in just about 2 minutes with our next session, which is with our good friend, the young and very vivacious Zachary Ramos. So take care. We'll be right back. Thank you all for joining us. Again, thank you, Angela.
Thank you.